Seattle was drowning again. The winter rain didn't fall so much as it blurred, turning every edge of the city into a watercolor of gray and glass. In a third-floor apartment that smelled faintly of milk and rain-wet laundry, Ava Brooks was trying to keep the night from collapsing. She stood by the crib, swaying gently, one hand patting her son's small back, the other rubbing warmth into her own arms. The heater had given up hours ago. Leo's eyelids fluttered, his breath a soft rhythm against the quiet. Almost there. Baby, she whispered. Her voice was a lullaby without melody. When he finally drifted off, she exhaled, the kind of sigh that belonged to women who'd carried too much for too long. She set the empty bottle on the counter beside a stack of unpaid bills, electricity, rent, medical debt. Each envelope a silent accusation. Outside, a siren wailed, then faded. The city never really slept. It just changed its kind of noise. Ava's phone buzzed once. She barely looked up. Probably another low-balance alert. Another reminder that her account was gasping like the rest of her life. But when the screen lit, something about the format caught her eye. Transaction confirmed. $1,000. $1,000. $1,000. USD. Read Horizon Holdings. She froze. The kitchen light flickered once, as if the universe itself couldn't believe what it had just done. $1 billion. She blinked. The message stayed. No typo. No phishing link. No call to action scam. The logo was real. The timestamp. Official. Her first thought was almost absurd. My account doesn't even have space for that many zeros. She laughed under her breath, a dry, frightened sound. The baby stirred. Ava swallowed hard and checked again. The security code in the footer matched her bank's format. The encryption signature was flawless. The money wasn't requested. It was received. For a long minute, she didn't move. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Then her mind began to spiral. It's a mistake. Someone's fat finger at a terminal. A transfer gone wrong. Or maybe not a mistake at all. Maybe a test. Maybe a trap. She had seen things like this in the tiny accounting firms where she used to work before the layoffs. The way people's eyes changed when too many zeros appeared in the wrong place. Integrity was easy until it was tested by hunger. Her stomach twisted. She opened the fridge one egg. Half a carton of milk. Nothing that could stretch another week. Rent was due Monday. Leo's fever medicine almost gone. The phone screen glowed against her skin. $1 billion could change everything. Her pulse drummed in her ears. What if she moved just a little? Transferred a small amount. Something no one would notice. Just enough to breathe. Ava closed her eyes and saw her mother's old house in ruins. Saw Leo's chest rise and fall, the shape of his ribs too sharp for comfort. Then she saw herself explaining to him one day why she chose to steal. No, she whispered. No, not like this. She paced the narrow kitchen. The floor creaked in complaint. She wanted someone to call, anyone to tell her what to do. But there was no one. Her mother had stopped answering months ago, too ashamed to admit she'd lost everything to foreclosure. Friends from her old job avoided her, afraid poverty was contagious. The only sound was rain against the window, a steady, relentless knocking, as if the world wanted in. Ava turned on the radio for company. Static. Then a late-night host, murmuring about storms, about power outages downtown. Her reflection in the microwave glass looked older than 32 tired eyes. Soft strength, quiet defiance. She whispered to herself, "You're not a thief, Ava. You're not like them." But the phone buzzed again. A new message, Authorization pending. Reply. Yes to confirm transaction completion. Cutoff 10:30 a.m. Her throat went dry. Someone was waiting for her response. Ava opened her laptop and searched Reed Horizon Holdings, CEO. The name came up instantly. Elias Reed. 40. White. Billionaire developer. Private as a myth. A man whose photo seemed sculpted from the same steel and glass that built the city. What did a man like that know about the way hunger hummed in the bones? She stared at the ceiling as if answers might drip down with the rain. Then, slowly, she took a plastic zip bag from a drawer, the kind she used to store pacifiers and receipts. She slipped the phone inside, sealed it, and pressed the edge until it clicked. "You're not mine," she said softly, "and I'm not yours." The decision felt small, almost anticlimactic, but her chest ached like she'd just lifted the world. She sat on the floor beside Leo's crib, knees pulled to her chest. The glow from the bagged phone painted her face in faint blue. For a moment, she imagined what would happen if she kept it, how her life might look: no debt, no fear, no more choosing between heat and groceries, maybe even a small house with a yard. Maybe she could buy back her mother's home. Then she imagined the other version headlines. Investigations. Her son in foster care. Morality was supposed to be simple, but in the silence of that kitchen, it felt cruelly complex. She whispered a prayer she hadn't said in years. "God, tell me what to do." No thunder replied, only the steady voice of rain. At 4:00 a.m. Exhaustion 1. She drifted into a half-sleep on the kitchen floor, dreaming of water rising. When morning came, Seattle was silver. Ava woke to Leo's cry and a gray light pushing through the blinds. The phone still lay sealed on the counter, inert and heavy, as if the number inside it could bend gravity itself. She checked her bank app once more. The balance still showed the impossible $1,000. Her pulse jumped. It was real, or real enough to ruin her life. She called the bank. The automated voice told her to visit your nearest branch for corporate transactions above your account threshold. Corporate transaction. The words didn't even belong in her mouth. Her mind raced. If she ignored it, maybe it would disappear. If she reported it, maybe she'd be blamed. She thought of the baby's cough that wouldn't stop, the unpaid hospital bill, the neighbor, Mrs. Park, who'd once said, "Honesty is a luxury for people who can afford it." Was that true? Ava looked at the ceiling and felt the truth press down like the weather. She couldn't afford honesty, but she couldn't afford losing herself either. She set Leo in his stroller, wrapped him in a small blanket printed with faded stars, and stared at the city skyline through the window. Somewhere out there was the man whose mistake or intention had placed a fortune in her hands. Maybe he doesn't even know yet, she thought. But what if he did? What if the message wasn't a mistake, but a signal? The thought unsettled her. She felt watched, absurd as it was. Her phone, sealed in plastic, sat on the counter like an eye. She turned away, gathered her courage in the only way she knew, by moving. By dawn, the rain had sharpened. It wasn't drizzle anymore. It was the kind that bit. Ava dressed quickly, pulled on a worn coat, and left Leo with Mrs. Park across the hall. "Bank business," she explained, though the words felt ridiculous. On the street. Her boots soaked instantly. The bus stop shelter leaked from a cracked roof. A billboard loomed overhead, "Reed Horizon, building tomorrow." She stared at it until her bus arrived. The ride downtown took 40 minutes, long enough for doubt to creep back in. She could still turn around. Pretend she'd never seen the message. Return to her small world of scraping by. But when she pressed her palm to her pocket, the phone was there, cold through the fabric, heavy as truth. Seattle's skyline emerged through the fog, steel towers, cranes like frozen wings. Each building shimmered with rain, reflections of a world that thrived on glass and money. Her stop came sooner than expected. She stepped off the bus, the wind slapping her wet hair against her face. Across the street stood the Reed Horizons Tower, 30 floors of mirrored perfection. The revolving doors spun like an invitation and a warning all at once. For a long time, Ava just stood there, the rain sliding down her face, her heartbeat a drum beneath her coat. "You could turn back," she whispered. No one would know. But she already knew. Ava crossed the street. Each step splashed like punctuation on a decision that had no rewrite. Inside, the marble floor shone like still water. A security guard looked up, eyebrows lifting at the sight of a drenched woman clutching a small plastic bag. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Ava nodded, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I need to return something." He frowned. "To who?" She met his eyes. "Mr. Elias Reed." The guard hesitated, unsure if this was a prank or the start of a problem. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," she said quietly. "But he'll want this back." The words hung between them, simple, clean, and impossible to argue with. Far above them, in an office that touched the clouds, Elias Reed's morning had just begun. He didn't yet know that a stranger soaked in rain was about to walk into his world carrying not just his billion-dollar mistake, but something rarer, something that couldn't be bought or built. Down in the lobby, Ava waited, water dripping from her sleeves, the sealed phone pressed against her chest. Outside, the rain intensified, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Morning in Seattle arrived like a reluctant confession, gray, heavy, unready for light. The rain had softened to mist, a veil that blurred the skyline into watercolor. Ava Brooks stood at the edge of Reed Horizons Tower, her reflection faint in the glass. 30 floors of mirrored perfection rose before her, indifferent and cold. The building looked like it had never known the concept of mistake. She clutched the sealed phone against her chest. Inside that plastic bag sat $1 billion that didn't belong to her, and a question that refused to fade. Why me? Ava hesitated at the revolving door. Men and women in tailored suits slipped past, their steps precise, their umbrellas black as confession ink. She waited for a break, then stepped forward. Warm air swallowed her. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and marble. White light reflected in endless planes. The air smelled faintly of citrus and money. For a moment, she froze. Everything here gleamed: the floor, the walls, even the people. She felt like a stain someone had forgotten to wipe away. A guard at the reception desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "Ma'am." His tone polite but wary, the way people speak when they suspect a problem is about to become theirs. "I need to return something," Ava said, her voice steady but quiet. He frowned. "Return what, exactly?" "This." She lifted the zip bag slightly, condensation clouding the plastic. The guard blinked at the phone inside. "And you're here for Mr. Elias Reed." Now his brows rose. "You have an appointment with Mr. Reed?" "No." The pause stretched. The sound of shoes clicking across marble filled it. Somewhere above them, an elevator chimed. Then I'm afraid the guard began. But Ava interrupted softly. Tell him it's about a transfer, a very large one. Something in her calm unnerved him. He turned, murmured to a second guard, and picked up the phone on his desk. His tone lowered, uncertain. This is lobby. We have a woman here. Says she's returning a transfer. Yes. Sir. No. She doesn't have ID. She's wet. No. Sir. She's not armed. Ava stared at the rain dripping from her sleeves, pooling at her feet. She could hear her own heartbeat louder than the lobby's hum. The second guard shifted uneasily. Maybe you should wait. Ma'am? Before she could answer, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A tall man stepped out. Gray shirt, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. No tie. There was nothing ostentatious about him. Yet the air changed when he appeared, subtle, but unmistakable, like pressure before a storm. Elias Reed. He looked younger than his legend late 30s. Maybe, but there was an old precision in him, the kind that came from too many years measuring risk. He scanned the lobby once. Then his gaze found her. For a second, Ava forgot to breathe. His eyes were pale steel steady, unreadable, and yet something flickered there. Recognition. Or maybe curiosity, wrapped in disbelief. He crossed the marble floor, slow and deliberate. The guard straightened. You called about a transfer? He asked the guard, not taking his eyes off Ava. Yes, sir. She says she's here to return something. Elias's gaze dropped to the plastic bag in her hand. May I? Ava hesitated, then stepped forward and placed it in his palm. It's not mine, she said quietly. He turned the phone over, reading the message through the cloudy plastic. The timestamp, the transaction code. His expression barely shifted, but a muscle tightened at his jaw. This was sent to you, yes, at 2:47 this morning, and you came here to give it back. I didn't know what else to do. For the first time, his composure cracked just slightly, like light through tempered glass. Most people, he murmured, would have done something else. Ava met his eyes. I'm not most people. Elias looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing the contradiction, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, coat frayed at the sleeves, yet dignity straight as a line. He gestured toward the elevator. Come upstairs. The guards exchanged quick looks. Elias ignored them. It's all right. She's with me. Ava hesitated only a moment before following him. The elevator rose in silence, slicing through the tower's spine. Floor numbers blinked past like measured heartbeats. You work in accounting? Elias asked, eyes on the ascending digits. I used to, she replied. Small firms? Construction budgets mostly. Then you recognized the name. Yes. She paused, and I recognized the weight of a mistake that big. He glanced at her. Yet you didn't exploit it. I have a son, she said simply, and someday he'll ask me who I was before he remembers me. I want to like the answer. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, not mockery either, just the faintest trace of respect. When the doors opened, the world changed again. His office stretched the length of the floor, walls of glass overlooking Lake Union. The rain looked softer from up here, almost beautiful. Models of skyscrapers lined the shelves, miniature cities of order and control. Elias gestured to a chair, but Ava remained standing. He unsealed the bag, unlocked the phone with a code she didn't see, and stared at the screen for a long time. This shouldn't have reached you, he said finally. It's an internal authorization test, a simulation for a project merger. The system must have rerouted it. So it's not real money. It's real, he said. Just not yours or mine anymore. Technically, it's corporate capital. But you intercepted it before it processed. That's remarkable. She frowned. Remarkable. Most people wouldn't have noticed the error. Fewer would have reported it. None would have shown up in person. Ava folded her arms. Uneasy. You sound surprised that honesty exists. Not surprised, Elias said softly. Just reminded. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. Beneath the crisp exterior was fatigue, a kind she recognized. The exhaustion of someone who'd spent too long pretending control was the same as peace. He set the phone down and leaned back. You could have ignored it. Mrs. Brooks, she said. Ava Brooks. You could have ignored it. Mrs. Brooks. I almost did. What made you come? She looked out the window. The rain streaked down the glass like veins of light. Because keeping it would have cost me more than it's worth. He studied her face. And for the first time, his guarded expression softened. Integrity doesn't usually come cheap, he said. It's all I can afford, she replied. The words lingered in the quiet between them. When she turned to leave, he stood too quickly, as if he hadn't decided what he wanted to say until the moment risked slipping away. Wait. Ava paused at the doorway. Elias searched for words, unused to explaining himself. Seattle has a lot of people who need money, he said finally, but only one who brought it back. Her lips curved, faint but genuine. I don't need money. Mr. Reed. He tilted his head. No, I need peace. Their eyes met, two kinds of solitude recognizing themselves. Then she turned and walked away. Down in the elevator, Ava's reflection stared back at her from mirrored walls. Her hair clung to her face, eyes bright with something she couldn't name. She told herself it was relief, nothing more. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still shimmered with aftermath. She stepped onto the street, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The world looked the same: traffic lights, puddles, people rushing, but something inside her had shifted. Somewhere high above, behind those mirrored windows, a man she didn't know was watching the same rain, thinking of a woman who'd walked into his empire carrying honesty like it was the rarest currency left. Ava pulled her coat tighter and started toward the bus stop. Halfway there, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from the bank. Unknown number. Thank you for returning what wasn't yours. But maybe it was meant to find you. She stared at the message, heart thudding. No name, no signature. Across the street, the tower's glass caught a shard of light. Ava turned away, unsure if what she felt was fear or the beginning of something else entirely. The wind picked up again, carrying the faint metallic scent of rain and fate. And somewhere above the city, Elias Reed looked out through the glass wall of his office, wondering for the first time in years whether he'd just met the one person who could still surprise him. The rain had not stopped. In Seattle, it rarely did. It simply changed form. Sometimes a whisper, sometimes a curtain. Ava had learned to read its moods like she read ledgers. The soft rain meant hesitation. The heavy kind meant warning. 3 days had passed since she'd walked out of Reed Horizon's tower, believing she would never hear from him again. Yet when her phone rang that morning, his voice was there, calm, precise, threaded with something that sounded almost like apology. Miss Brooks. I could use your help. Just for a few hours. It's a matter of numbers. He didn't say trust. He said numbers. And yet she heard what he meant. Now she stood once more inside the mirrored tower. Her reflection caught between marble and glass. The receptionist recognized her this time, offered a polite nod that almost passed for respect. When the elevator doors opened, Elias Reed was waiting, no jacket. Just a white shirt, rolled at the sleeves, the faint trace of fatigue softening his sharpness. You came, he said simply. You asked. He smiled, brief and restrained, like someone who didn't smile often, but remembered how. Let's get started. The office looked different in daylight. Sunlight leaked through the rain-streaked windows, painting pale ribbons across the floor. A large map covered an entire wall, a patchwork of blueprints, topographical scans, and zoning overlays. Thin red lines crossed it like veins. Ava stepped closer. What project is this harbor renewal? Elias said. A redevelopment initiative housing, green zones, flood protection. She tilted her head, tracing one marked section with her eyes. Something about the street names tugged at her. Brookline Avenue, 8th and Alder. The words hit her like a voice from a past she'd buried under debt and silence. Her mother's street. The small yellow house with the porch swing. The one that vanished after foreclosure. Her pulse stumbled. This area here, she said slowly. What's going to happen to it? Elias turned to her. You recognize it? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He hesitated before answering, his tone measured. There are plans to rebuild it, but not the way I intended. She looked up sharply. Rebuild or erase? The question hung between them like static. He walked to the map, pointing to the highlighted zones. Developers see land value. I see lives still tethered to this place. Families like yours. Her breath caught. You knew I didn't, he said. Not until you told me. The room seemed to shrink, sound folding in on itself. She looked at him, at the man whose name signed the blueprints that would decide who stayed and who vanished. You're the one who can stop it, she said. I'm trying to, he replied. But the board doesn't want affordable housing. They want returns. Investors don't fund compassion. Miss Brooks. The bitterness in his tone surprised her. It wasn't cynicism. It was grief disguised as control. Ava crossed her arms. And what do you want? Elias's gaze drifted toward the rain-dark window. I want to build something that lasts longer than greed. He said it quietly, as if confessing to himself. Something inside Ava shifted the faint recognition of loneliness she had felt that first day, now mirrored in him. Two people from opposite worlds, both searching for the same impossible thing, peace. He gestured to a folder on the desk. These are expense summaries. I'd appreciate your eyes on them. Ava opened the folder. Rows of figures ran like nervous sentences. At first glance, everything looked legitimate. Then her instinct, the one that had saved companies and cost her jobs, stirred. Here, she murmured, pointing. Flood mitigation. The cost doubles in 1 quarter, without justification. Elias came closer, close enough that she could smell faint cedar and rain on his shirt. You're sure numbers don't lie, she said. People do. Their eyes met over the page. For a long second, neither looked away. He straightened, clearing his throat. I have internal auditors for this. Then why call me? She asked. He hesitated. Because you don't owe anyone here anything. That's rare. Ava wanted to say she wasn't sure she owed herself much either. But instead she said, "Sometimes being outside the circle is the only way to see it clearly." Elias studied her, the corner of his mouth turning upward in something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's exactly why I need you." She shook her head. "You don't even know me. I know what kind of person returns $1 billion, he said softly. Her pulse quickened, not from pride, but from the quiet intensity in his voice. Hours passed. The rain thickened outside, tracing slow rivers down the glass. Ava worked in silence, scanning numbers, marking inconsistencies. Elias moved around the office like a man half in thought, half in exile, pacing, calling, then watching her without meaning to. At one point, she caught his reflection in the window, tall, solitary, a silhouette caught between storm and skyline. "You built this city," she said quietly, not looking up. He glanced over. "That's what they say, but it doesn't make you happy, does it?" He didn't answer right away. "Happiness isn't scalable," he said finally. "Profit is." Ava smiled faintly, though her chest tightened. "You sound like someone who's tried both." Elias looked at her, then really looked, and failed at both. He said. The honesty startled her. She wanted to ask what had broken him, but something in his expression told her not to. Some truths were too raw to touch yet. By late afternoon, the office lights dimmed automatically. Outside, the city shimmered beneath the rain, its skyline a reflection of everything they couldn't control. Ava stacked the files neatly. "I should go." Elias nodded. "Thank you for coming." As she turned to leave, he added quietly, "What happened to the house?" She froze. "My mother lost it," she said after a long pause. "Medical bills. Foreclosure. She rents now, 2 hours north." "I'm sorry," he said. Ava exhaled. "Don't be." She still calls it our house, even though it's someone else's name on the deed. Maybe that's what survival looks like, pretending ownership of what broke you. Elias stepped closer. Maybe survival is the bravest kind of ownership. Their eyes met again, and the room felt smaller, filled with a silence that wasn't uncomfortable, only charged. For a heartbeat, the distance between billionaire and single mother dissolved, leaving two souls hovering at the fragile intersection of truth and need. When Ava finally left the building, the rain had turned silver in the streetlights. She walked without umbrella, the city's pulse humming around her. She thought of the map, the red lines cutting through her mother's street, the quiet conviction in Elias's voice when he said, "I'm trying to save it." For the first time, she wondered if she'd misjudged him, or worse, if she'd begun to care. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an unknown number again. "Some truths are safer buried. Leave harbor alone." Ava stopped walking. The wind picked up, lifting the wet edges of her coat. She looked up at the glass tower in the distance, its lights glowing like watchful eyes. Her breath trembled. Someone knew she'd been inside. Someone was watching. And suddenly, the map on that office wall didn't just feel like memory. It felt like warning. In his office above, Elias stood alone before the same map, his tie loosened, his reflection ghosted over the grid of streets. His phone buzzed too. A message. Unsigned. "She's asking questions. Handle it." He stared at the words, jaw tightening. Then he looked back at the map, at the block she'd pointed to, the one that used to be her mother's home. He thought of her eyes when she recognized it, the mix of hurt and defiance, the kind of truth that no contract could contain. For the first time in years, Elias Reed didn't know whose side he was on. Outside, The rain intensified, drumming against the glass. Down below, Ava disappeared into the city, her silhouette fading into the storm. Neither of them knew it yet. But Harbor had already tied their lives together in numbers, in memory, and in something more dangerous than both trust. Seattle was all gray and glass again. The kind of gray that blurred the hours together, until morning and night felt like the same weary breath. Ava Brooks had become a fixture in the 29th floor office of Reed Horizons. At first, it was supposed to be a short-term consult, a few days of auditing the Harbor renewal accounts, but a few days stretched into weeks. Now she moved through the quiet hum of the office like someone who belonged, and didn't, her cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows, her curls tied in a loose knot, her laptop glowing with columns of figures that most people would never notice, let alone understand. She wasn't just checking numbers, she was stitching truth back together. Each discrepancy she corrected felt like patching a wound in a body that didn't know it was bleeding. False contracts, duplicate invoices, safety budgets multiplied without explanation. Somewhere behind all those digits was intent greed disguised as progress. And Elias Reed, her unlikely ally, watched her do it. He didn't hover. He observed quietly, from the edges, a habit born from years of running boardrooms where silence meant power. But Ava's silence was different. Hers was concentration, not distance. Some nights, when everyone else had gone home, she'd still be there, the light of her monitor painting her face in pale blue. He'd watch from his glass-walled office, not because he needed to, but because something about her steadiness unsettled him. It reminded him of what he used to be before ambition hardened into armor. The first time it happened, the moment something unspoken shifted, it was nearly midnight. A storm rattled the glass, and the building lights flickered once, briefly plunging the floor into dim gold. Ava jumped slightly, hand hovering over her keyboard. Elias appeared in the doorway a moment later, 2 cups in hand. "The power grid hates this weather," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "Coffee?" She looked up, surprised. "You drink this late?" He shrugged. "You work this late?" She hesitated, then took the cup. The heat seeped through her cold fingers, startlingly intimate. He leaned against the desk beside her, glancing at the spreadsheets on her screen. "You've found more irregularities. 3 subcontractors billing for the same foundation materials," she said. "If these numbers are real, someone's rebuilding the same wall 3 times. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "And the board wonders why I stopped trusting signatures." Ava smiled faintly. "Numbers don't lie. Remember only the people writing them," he replied, echoing her own words from before. For a moment, silence settled, not uncomfortable, but heavy with something unsaid. The rain outside softened, tapping the windows in uneven rhythm. Elias studied her profile, the curve of her jaw, the concentration still etched in her brow even after hours of work. There was a grace to her diligence, something resilient yet unguarded. "Do you ever rest?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, eyes still on the screen. "Single mothers don't get luxury hours." He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I suppose billionaires don't either. We just disguise exhaustion better." That made her glance up. Their eyes met, a long, unintentional look that neither broke quickly enough. Something passed through the air, faint as a current, but undeniable. Elias looked away first, his voice a little rougher. "I didn't mean to keep you. Go home, Ava." She hesitated, watching him as he moved back toward his desk. His shoulders carried the kind of tension that didn't come from work alone. Do you ever go home, Elias? He stopped, half turned. The sound of his name in her mouth startled him. No title, no formality. Just Elias. His reply came slower, quieter. Not really. I just leave the office sometimes. Their gazes locked again, two people who'd both forgotten what leaving felt like. Over the next few days, the space between them changed. They worked together more closely. Lunches became shared coffee breaks, silence replaced by small talk that carried more than it said. Ava started noticing things, the way he loosened his tie when thinking, how his reflection lingered in the glass long after he turned away. Elias noticed, too, how she hummed softly when cross-checking data, how her laughter, rare but genuine, made the sterile office feel like somewhere human again. One evening, as she scrolled through the contractor files, a note popped up in the shared system. From ER. You're right about the harbor discrepancies, but what you're fixing may cost you. Ava read the line twice before replying. From A. B. Then it's already costing too many others. He didn't respond, but when she looked up, he was watching her through the glass wall. That weekend, the investigation deepened. They uncovered an entire chain of falsified reports, shell vendors connected to a company called Harland Company, each tied to inflated budgets under the harbor project. This is deliberate, Ava said, pointing at the columns of duplicate invoices. Elias leaned over her shoulder, close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, the scent of rain still clinging to his coat. If this goes public, half the board will burn. Maybe they should, she murmured. His hand brushed the edge of the desk near hers, accidental. Or maybe not. The contact was fleeting, but her pulse betrayed her anyway. He noticed. He always noticed. But he said nothing. Instead, he stepped back, folding his arms. You're making enemies. Ava. She looked up. So are you. He gave a faint smile. Difference is, they expect it from me. Maybe they should expect it from both of us. Their words were professional. Their eyes weren't. Later that night, after she'd gone, Elias remained in his office. Lights dim. The storm outside refusing to end. He replayed the day in his mind, her laughter echoing faintly in the hall, the way she'd stood her ground over numbers that most people would have ignored. He thought of how easily he'd started relying on her voice, her logic, her steady presence beside the chaos. And beneath that, something far more dangerous stirred the realization that trust was turning into something deeper, something he wasn't ready for. Elias Reed had built an empire on control of people, profit, perception, but with her, control felt like a language he no longer spoke fluently. He looked at the last message she'd sent. Then it's already costing too many others. A quiet smile ghosted across his face. Somewhere in the background, the rain hit harder, like a heartbeat he couldn't slow down. Across the city, Ava sat by her apartment window, Leo asleep in the next room. The glow from the streetlights shimmered across her face. She should have been proud of the progress of the files she'd uncovered, the truth she'd helped surface. But instead, her thoughts kept circling back to him. Elias Reed, the man she'd once seen as unreachable, now somehow too close in her mind. She remembered his voice, calm but weary, his eyes, distant but searching, the way he said her name, careful, almost reverent. And she hated herself for wondering what it would feel like if he said it without restraint. Ava shook her head, whispering, "You're not here for him. You're here for Harbor." But somewhere deep inside, she wasn't sure she still believed it. Monday came with clearer skies. For the first time in weeks, the city seemed to breathe. When Ava entered the office, Elias was already there, standing by the map again, that same wall of red lines and futures. He didn't look at her right away. "They've started asking questions," he said. "The board. They know someone's digging. Then they're scared," she said, setting down her bag. "Or dangerous," he countered. Their eyes met tension and something warmer threading between. She took a step closer. "We can prove it. Elias, you and I, he repeated softly, as if testing the shape of it. For a brief moment, neither spoke. The office was too quiet, the air too full. He reached past her to the desk, their hands brushing again. This time neither pulled away. Outside, the rain began once more, a fine, steady rhythm against the glass, like the city was holding its breath for them. Elias whispered, "Be careful, Ava. They'll come after what matters most to you." Her voice trembled just slightly. "And what matters most to you?" he hesitated. Then, quietly, "That answer keeps changing." Seattle's rain had quieted that night, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Ava Brooks was folding Leo's tiny clothes by the dim light of the kitchen when she heard the sound, 3 faint knocks against the apartment door. Not loud enough to alarm, just deliberate enough to be remembered. She froze. The clock read 11:37 p.m. No one visited at this hour. For a moment, she thought it was a neighbor, maybe Mrs. Park, coming for sugar or help with her heater. But when she looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty, just the pale glow of the exit light, flickering like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Something small lay on the floor, a plain envelope. No name, no logo. Ava opened the door slowly. The envelope was damp at the corners, sealed with nothing but adhesive and intent. She hesitated, then picked it up. The weight startled her, too heavy for paper. She took it to the table, heart drumming. Leo stirred in his crib, soft and safe, a sound that made her braver. With careful fingers, she opened the flap. Stacks of cash, neat, crisp, wrong, and no note, except a faint indentation pressed into the inner fold, as if someone had written and then erased words. "Keep quiet." A chill spread through her. It wasn't the money that frightened her. It was the silence that came with it. The next morning, she stood in Elias Reed's office with the envelope on his desk between them. The room felt colder than usual, or maybe that was just him, sleeves rolled, jaw tight. His usual calm replaced by something harder. "Who knows where you live?" he asked. Ava shook her head. "Only my landlord. A few neighbors. No one from here." He opened the envelope, stared at the cash, then exhaled sharply through his nose. "Harlan Cohn," he said. "It has to be. They've been watching every move we make. They think fear is currency." Ava said, "And they're right." He replied quietly, "It buys silence." Her eyes lifted to his, but not mine. He looked at her, then really looked, and something in his expression shifted. Admiration, anger, maybe both. "You should have called me immediately," he said. "I did," she answered. "By coming here." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain blurred the skyline behind him, streaking silver across the glass. Elias turned away, jaw flexing. "You shouldn't have to deal with this." "I already am," she said, "whether I choose to or not." He faced her again, voice low but fierce. "They'll try again. Bribes if they think you'll bend. threats if you don't. Ava crossed her arms. Then let them try. That answer quiet, steady knocked something loose inside him. He saw in her the kind of courage he'd only ever purchased from others. A woman with no safety net, no power, yet somehow freer than everyone he knew. He picked up the envelope again, fingers brushing the bills as if testing their weight. "You could keep it," he said softly. Not as a challenge, but a confession. "I could." Ava agreed, and it would pay for rent, medicine, maybe a better school for Leo. Then why not? Because I'd see it every day and know I sold the one thing that still belongs to me. Her voice was quiet, almost tender. "My peace." Elias met her gaze. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding and something more dangerous, something that didn't belong in boardrooms or contracts. He took a step closer. "You could have walked away when this started. No one would blame you." She gave a faint smile. "No one would remember me, either." That made him stop. For the first time, he looked uncertain, like a man standing on the edge of something he couldn't name. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Ava looked at him, eyes steady. "Neither do you." That night, he drove her home. It wasn't planned. It just happened, a quiet insistence after the meeting ended, after she'd refused his offer of security detail. "Just a ride," he'd said, "to make sure you get home safe." The streets were slick with light. Seattle reflected itself on every surface, neon and rain, steel and ghost. They didn't speak much. The hum of the engine filled the space between them. At a red light, Elias finally said, "When you handed me that envelope, I thought about the first time I saw you here. You looked terrified. But you walked in anyway." "I was terrified," Ava admitted. "And now—" She smiled faintly, watching the city blur past the window. "Now I'm just tired. But fear feels smaller when you're already broke." He laughed once, softly, shaking his head. "You have no idea how rare that kind of strength is." Ava turned to him. "Strength isn't rare, Elias. Just invisible. It's in people who don't get noticed: single moms, janitors, clerks, the ones holding everything up while the world forgets to look down." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You talk like you've seen both sides." "I have," she said, "and neither one is fair." They fell quiet again. The rain returned, tapping against the windshield like soft percussion. When he pulled up in front of her building, she hesitated before unbuckling her seatbelt. "You don't owe me anything," she said gently. He turned to her, voice low. "That's not how this works." "Then how does it?" He exhaled, leaning back. "I don't know anymore." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and real. For a moment, the city disappeared. There was only the warmth of the car, the rain, and the shared knowledge that something was changing, something neither of them had planned for. Ava reached for the door handle, but his voice stopped her. "Ava," he said softly. She looked back. "I can protect you." Her eyes met his, calm and unflinching. "I don't need a savior." "Elias." He blinked, taken aback. "I just need someone to stand beside me." He said nothing, but his throat moved, and his gaze softened in a way that almost hurt to watch. Outside, thunder rolled far off over the bay. Ava opened the door, stepping into the wet glow of the streetlights. She turned back once, offering a small nod, a promise, or a farewell. He couldn't tell. Elias watched her go until the rain swallowed her silhouette. Back in his penthouse, He poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. The city stretched beneath him, a kingdom of glass and silence. He thought about her words, about the envelope still locked in his desk, and about the unbearable clarity of her conviction. He'd spent years surrounded by people who obeyed, negotiated, performed. Ava didn't perform. She simply existed fiercely, honestly, and somehow that undid him more than any scandal or betrayal ever could. He looked at his reflection in the window and saw a man who had everything except the one thing she refused to sell: peace. Elias Reed had never envied anyone, until now. Ava sat on the floor of her apartment, Leo asleep beside her. The storm had eased to a whisper. She thought about the ride, the look in Elias's eyes when she said she didn't need saving. He had seemed almost relieved. She wondered why. The city hummed below her window, indifferent as always. But tonight, it felt less lonely. She reached for her phone, typed a message she didn't send. "Thank you for standing beside me." She erased it, turned off the light, and lay beside her son. Sleep came slow. But when it did, it carried a strange kind of calm, the kind that comes after you stop running from fear and start walking toward truth, no matter who follows. In his office the next morning, Elias opened his inbox to find no messages from her, yet somehow felt her absence as if it were sound. He looked out over the waking city and thought, not for the first time, that maybe the real test of power wasn't how much you could protect, but how much you could respect. And for the first time in years, he felt small in the best possible way. The world didn't fall all at once. It cracked slowly, headline by headline, whisper by whisper, until one morning, the cracks reached them both. Ava Brooks woke to the sound of her name on the television, not from a local reporter she could ignore, but from the national network that had never known she existed. Breaking news sources allege internal misconduct at Reed Horizons. CEO Elias Reed and temporary accounting consultant Ava Brooks accused of manipulating corporate funds under the guise of whistleblowing. Her heart stuttered. The announcer's voice was calm, professional, cruel in its precision. Photographs of Elias flashed on the screen: boardroom shots, charity galas, a man made of composure. Then hers. A grainy image from the lobby camera the day she first came to return the phone. Wet hair, worn coat. The look of someone who didn't belong. They'd turned her into a symbol not of honesty, but of scandal. Corporate affair, secret alliance, hidden agenda. Each headline stripped her down until all that was left was rumor. Leo stirred in his crib, crying softly. Ava turned off the TV, clutching him to her chest. Her body shook, not from cold, but from disbelief. She had done everything right, told the truth, returned what wasn't hers, tried to fix what was broken, and somehow the world had found a way to make her the villain. The rain outside tapped against the window, relentless as the noise inside her head. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then opened the message. "Truth won't save you, Miss Brooks." The words were simple, chilling. Her first instinct was to throw the phone across the room. The second was to hide. Instead, she just sank into the couch, pressing Leo closer, rocking him in silence. Her breath came shallow. Every light in the apartment suddenly felt too bright. Every sound too loud. When the knock came, she didn't answer at first. 3 quiet raps measured. Familiar. Her chest tightened. She went to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw him. Elias Reed without his suit, without his armor, his hair damp from rain, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. When she opened the door, the hallway light fell across his face, revealing exhaustion carved deep into every line. "They've stripped me of the board seat," he said simply. Ava just nodded. Words felt useless. He stepped inside, leaving a trail of water on the floor. No entourage, no power, just a man who'd been dismantled by his own truth. He stood there for a long moment, his gaze drifting over the small apartment, the worn couch, the toy blocks scattered on the floor, the faint hum of the fridge. A world so far from the glass towers he once ruled. "You shouldn't be alone," he said finally. Ava set Leo down gently. "I'm not." He looked at her then. Really looked, the trembling in her fingers, the stubborn steadiness in her eyes. "Have they contacted you?" She handed him the phone. "Just this." He read the message, jaw tightening. "They're watching," he murmured, "trying to break you." Ava laughed softly, not with humor, but fatigue. "They already did." Elias shook his head. "No, they only think they have." He turned toward her, something fragile breaking in his voice. "We still have the data, the real proof, the audits, the evidence. It's not over." Her reply came like a sigh. "And if the truth kills us both?" He met her eyes. Then at least it lived. There it was, that quiet conviction she both admired and feared. The thing that drew her toward him, even as the world tried to tear them apart. For a long moment, they stood in silence. The rain outside softened to a whisper, as if listening. She moved to the counter, needing distance, needing air. "You shouldn't be here. The press will find out." "I don't care." "You will when they destroy what's left of you." Elias walked closer, voice low. "There's nothing left of me they haven't already taken." That stopped her. She turned. His eyes weren't the ones she'd seen in boardrooms. They were raw, unguarded, the eyes of a man who'd finally run out of places to hide. "I thought truth was supposed to protect people," she whispered. "So did I," he said, "until I realized people protect lies better." Their gazes locked, two souls stripped to their simplest form. No titles, no numbers, just fear and the fragile courage to stand through it. Ava swallowed hard. "You should go." "Let me stay," he said quietly. She blinked. "What?" "Just for tonight, to make sure you're safe." She wanted to protest, to tell him she didn't need protecting. But when she looked at him, his shoulders slumped. His hands trembling ever so slightly, she saw a man who needed to protect someone, if only to remember who he was. "Please," he added. The word was soft, but it broke her. Ava nodded. "All right." Night deepened. The city lights shimmered through the rain-streaked window. Leo slept soundly, a small island of peace amid chaos. Elias sat on the floor by the window, his back against the wall, watching the storm. His jacket hung over a chair. His shirt was half unbuttoned, sleeves rolled, as if even his clothing had surrendered. Ava made tea a small human ritual in an inhuman week. When she handed him a mug, their fingers brushed. A spark. Familiar now, but sharper this time, charged by everything unspoken. He looked up at her. "How do you still do it? Do what keeps steady, when everything's burning?" She thought for a moment. "Because if I fall apart, no one will put me back together. So I don't." He gave a faint smile, the kind that hurt more than it soothed. "I wish I'd known someone like you years ago." "You did," she said softly. "You just stopped listening." Elias blinked, caught between surprise and recognition. "You built walls out of power," Ava continued. "But power doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you alone." He looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "And yet somehow, standing here, I feel safer than I have in years." The air between them thickened. The rain slowed. Ava turned toward the window, afraid of what her heart might show if she met his eyes again. Outside, the city blurred, lights bending in the glass. Elias rose, walked to her side. He stood close, not touching, but near enough for her to feel the quiet heat of him. They watched the rain together. "You know," she said finally, "when I was a kid, my mother used to say, storms were just the sky starting over." Elias smiled faintly. "And what do you think now? That maybe she was right?" She looked up at him. "Maybe everything has to break before it can be honest again." He met her gaze. "Then maybe we're right where we're supposed to be." Something in his tone made her chest tighten, the fragile tenderness of two people who'd lost everything, but found a reason to stay standing. Hours passed in quiet company. At some point, Ava drifted to sleep on the couch. Leo curled beside her. Elias watched from across the room, the soft rhythm of their breathing almost enough to silence the chaos outside. He thought of the empire he'd built, the millions of decisions that had kept him awake through countless nights, and how none of them mattered next to the simple truth in front of him now. Peace wasn't built from glass and steel. It was this, the sight of a woman brave enough to tell the truth, and a child sleeping without fear. He leaned his head back against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. For once, he let go. When dawn came, the light was fragile, almost apologetic. Elias woke to the smell of coffee and the faint sound of Leo's laughter. Ava stood by the counter, hair loose, still in her nightshirt, her face calm but unreadable. "Morning," he said softly. She glanced over her shoulder. "You're still here. I said I'd stay, and you did." She handed him a cup, their fingers brushing again. For a brief moment, their eyes met, tired, bruised, but alive. Outside, the world was still burning. The headlines would keep spinning. The accusations would spread. But in that small kitchen, for one quiet breath of morning, there was something untouched. Not victory, not peace, just the fragile beginning of trust that had survived the collapse. The courthouse smelled of rain and marble clean, cold, and waiting. Ava Brooks stood beneath its high ceilings with a small flash drive clenched in her palm. It weighed almost nothing, yet it carried the sum of everything they'd lost and everything they still believed in. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning. Inside, the world narrowed to footsteps, echoes, and breath. Elias Reed walked a few paces behind her. No tailored suit, no boardroom armor, only a dark coat and the quiet steadiness of a man stripped bare. When their eyes met before the courtroom doors opened, he didn't say a word. He didn't have to. She understood. They had reached the place where truth stopped being an idea and became an act. When Ava took the stand, the air shifted. The prosecutor's voice echoed through the room, sharp and clinical. "Miss Brooks, do you confirm this device contains the internal audit logs of Reed Horizons, verified and time-stamped prior to the alleged data leak?" Ava's voice was steady. "Yes." "Were these files altered in any way? And how did you come to possess them?" She looked toward Elias, his gaze calm, unwavering before answering. "I extracted them with authorization from Mr. Reed the night before the system was shut down. We did it to preserve evidence of fraud before it was erased." Murmurs rippled through the room. The judge raised a hand for silence. "Please proceed. Miss Brooks." Ava inserted the flash drive into the court display. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screens flickered and truth bloomed in pixels. Invoices, wire trails, false vendor signatures. each line a piece of the hidden machinery that had been feeding greed in the name of progress. Names appeared, powerful names. Executives, contractors, board members who once toasted to integrity, now exposed by their own data. Gasps broke through the stillness. Rain began to fall against the tall glass walls, soft at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself were exhaling. Ava's hand trembled only once when she looked up and saw Elias watching her, not like a CEO defending his company, but like a man witnessing grace. His expression held pride, sorrow, and something deeper, the quiet awe of someone who had finally found something real to believe in. When the questioning ended, the courtroom felt lighter, but not free. The judge called for recess. Reporters stormed the hallway. Ava stood motionless, her heart still caught between fear and release. Elias approached slowly, rain dripping from his coat, his voice barely above the sound of footsteps. "You did it," he said. She shook her head. "We did it." His smile was small, tired. "They'll call this justice. But what it really is survival." Ava looked at him, the man who had once been untouchable, now standing in the open, vulnerable and human. "You lost everything," she said quietly. "So did you. Then why doesn't it feel like loss?" He paused, eyes searching hers. Because maybe it was never ours to keep, only to do right by. Outside, the storm had softened to a silver drizzle. The reporters still waited, but Ava barely noticed them. She stepped into the rain, head tilted back, the cold drops mixing with the warmth on her cheeks. Elias caught up beside her, without a word. His hand found hers, tentative, asking permission. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, the noise of the world fell away. There were no microphones, no verdicts, no titles. Only two people who had walked through ruin and found each other on the other side. Ava looked at him, really looked, and saw the exhaustion beneath his calm, the tremor behind his restraint, in his eyes. She saw the reflection of everything they'd fought for: truth, redemption, and the quiet, impossible kind of love that survives both. "Elias," she whispered. "What happens now?" he exhaled, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Now we start again, not as who we were, but as who we became." She nodded. Together, his fingers tightened gently around hers. "If you'll let me." Ava didn't answer, she just turned her palm, intertwining their hands completely. It wasn't a promise of forever. It was something rarer, a promise of presence. As they walked down the courthouse steps, the rain caught the light, scattering it across the wet pavement like shards of glass turned into stars. Somewhere behind them, the judge's gavel fell. Somewhere ahead, the city waited, bruised, but breathing. And between those two worlds, they walked hand in hand. No words, no need. The truth had lived, and somehow, so had they. 2 months later, Seattle was learning to breathe again. The storms had softened, the headlines had faded, and at the edge of the rebuilt harbor district, steel and sunlight rose where rot and silence once lived. Children's laughter echoed between the new walls. The air smelled of cedar, wet paint, and beginnings. Ava Brooks stood on the newly paved terrace, a name badge clipped to her chest. Community Director, Harbor Renewal Project. Her palms were damp, not from nerves, but from the strange gravity of peace. It still felt fragile, like holding light before it remembered how to burn. Down by the stage, workers finished setting up the podium. Behind them, a banner stretched in clean white letters. The Harbor Reborn. Elias Reed arrived quietly, as always. No security, No entourage, just a man in a dark coat, sleeves rolled, hair streaked with rain. He was no longer the billionaire face of Reed Horizons. He had resigned the title weeks earlier, trading influence for something rarer, freedom. When Ava saw him, her breath caught in the way it used to when the truth scared her, except this time, it didn't. The ceremony began just as drizzle touched the edges of the crowd. Ava stepped up to the microphone, the wind tugging lightly at her scarf. 2 months ago, she began. This place was a headline, a wound. She paused, scanning the faces, families, workers, volunteers. And now, it's proof that even what breaks us can be rebuilt. She lifted her gaze toward the glass skyline beyond. There are mistakes, she said softly, that exist to test our humanity. And there are people ordinary, stubborn, hopeful, born to mend those mistakes with their hearts. The audience was silent, listening as if the city itself leaned closer, behind the crowd. Elias's hands rested in his pockets. His smile was small, proud, a little wistful. Ava finished. This isn't the end of a story. It's just what comes after we choose not to give up. Applause rippled like rain on rooftops. And for a moment, everything felt whole. When she stepped down, Elias was waiting near the edge of the platform, holding a single black umbrella. He tilted it toward her with a faint smile. Still afraid of the rain, Ava laughed under her breath. Not anymore. Her eyes lifted toward the gray sky, softening to gold. This time, it's washing the old things away. He held the umbrella above them both, and for a quiet second, they stood together in the soft drizzle, two people who had walked through ruin and somehow found grace on the other side. The rainlight shimmered on their faces like memory forgiving itself. Later, as the crowd thinned and music faded, Ava walked along the edge of the construction site, rows of new homes waiting for families to move in. She passed a small plaque set in the wall. Integrity is the foundation of every home. She touched the metal, feeling its cold certainty beneath her fingertips. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe they had truly changed something. Elias joined her. They'll name this place after you one day, he said. She smiled. Let's hope not. Names fade. Actions don't. He nodded slowly, studying her. You still think about what comes next? Every day, she said. Because good things don't stay good by themselves. Before he could reply, her phone buzzed a new message. No contact name. She frowned and opened it. Only 3 words glowed on the screen. Harbor was only phase 1. Her smile faltered. A chill slipped beneath her calm. Elias saw her expression change. What is it? She handed him the phone. He read the message, jaw tightening, rain catching in his hair. Their eyes met. The moment of peace fractured, replaced by the old rhythm of unease, that thin line between victory and the next storm. Ava exhaled slowly. Looks like the city isn't finished with us yet. Elias glanced at the distant skyline cranes, glass, and new towers rising higher than ever. Then neither are we, he said quietly. She looked up at him, rain glistening on her lashes. And though fear returned, it came wrapped in something steadier purpose. The thunder rolled faintly beyond the bay, soft but certain. Seattle wasn't gray anymore. It shimmered alive, imperfect, and human. Sometimes, the right thing isn't the easy thing, but it's the choice that lets you become someone you can trust. Do the right thing, not for applause, not for scale, but for truth. Even the smallest act of honesty can rewrite tomorrow's story.